Well, good evening, folks. I'm Chris Vallillo. So happy to be here with you this evening in my first live stream on YouTube. I've done a number on Facebook. I'm being presented tonight through the McHenry Public Library and the Illinois Humanities Rhodes Scholar Program. And you'll notice on the chat box on the side, there is a link to a survey. If you can fill that survey out after the program, I'd appreciate that. You don't need to leave personal information, but what it does is give basic demographic information to the Illinois Humanities Council, and they use that to get national level funding to create programs like this. Well, I'm here today to do a program called The Farmer is the Man. And it was originally created several years ago as a performance to go around with a traveling exhibit from the Smithsonian Institution called Crossroads of Rural America. Now, farming has always been the backbone of rural America, and that heritage has been preserved in an extensive body of traditional and contemporary folk songs that tell the stories of the hardworking people that have struggled to preserve that way of life for generations. From traditional songs to Dust Bowl ballads by folks like Woody Guthrie, even to the works of contemporary folk songwriters, the subject of farming has always been rich ground for folk musicians. Now, I've spent the past 35 years in rural Illinois, where it's been my privilege to learn and perform and preserve many of the songs and stories that entertained and sustained folks for generations. And what I want to do today is perform a slice of some of that music for you and perhaps rekindle some pleasant memories for those of you that grew up in rural America, or any of you city slickers that are with us. Well, we'll give you some insights into the rural perspective, if you will. So let me start the show with a song by the great Canadian songwriter Stan Rogers. This is a song called The Field Behind the Plow that will not only give you deep insight into a farming and a farmer's life, it will quite literally put you on the seat of the tractor during spring plowing. Watch the field behind the plow turn to straight, dark rows. Feel the trickle in your clothes, blow the dust cake from your nose. Hear the tractor's steady roar. Oh, you can't stop now. There's a quarter section more or less to go. And it figures that the rain keeps its own sweet time. You could watch it come for miles, so I guess you've got a while. Ease the throttle out a hair. Every rod's a gain. There's a victory in every quarter mile. Poor old Cusick down the road, heartache hail and the hoppers brought him down. He gave it up and he left for town. Emmett Pierce the other day, he took a heart attack and he died at 42. You could see it coming on, 'cause he worked as hard as you. In an hour, maybe more, you'll be drenched clear through, but the air is cooler now. Pull your hat brim further down, watch the field behind the plow turn to straight, dark rows. Put another season's promise in the ground. the harvest's any good. The money just might cover all the loans. You mortgaged all you own. Buy the kids a winter's coat. Take the wife back east for Christmas if you can. All summer she hangs on when you're so tied to the land. For the good times come and go, but at least there's rain, so it won't be barren ground when September rolls around. Watch the field behind the plow turn to straight dark roads. Put another season's promise in the ground. Watch the field behind the plow turn to straight dark roads. Put another season's promise in the ground. That's a fine song by Stan Rogers, Field Behind the Plow. Now, farm life has always been a never-ending series of boom years followed by bust. And the hardest times of all, they came in the 1930s, back in the age of the Dust Bowl, when hundreds of thousands of American farmers and their families were driven from their land in what has been called the greatest ecological disaster of the 20th century. And the worst day of all took place on April the 14th of 1935, what they would call the fabled Black Sunday. A gigantic storm swept across Oklahoma at 65 miles an hour, carrying dust from 4 states. They say that when the storm hit, it was darker than night. Automobile ignitions failed. Cars ran into ditches. The noise was terrifying. Barbed wire fences glowed with static electricity. The air crackled. Radios stopped working, and many people believed that it was the end of the world. Well, in the small town of Pampa, Texas, a 22-year-old musician by the name of Woody Guthrie huddled with his wife, his children, and his neighbors in a room he would later describe as so black that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face in the daytime with the lights on. And in the midst of this chaos, he scribbled down a phrase that folks were saying, believing that it was the end of the world. Now, Woody would survive that. And he would take that phrase and turn it into a song that would become one of his most popular. He called it Dusty Old Dust, but we use the very phrase he wrote down. So long, it's been good to know you. I sung this song and I'll sing it again, of a place where I lived on the wild windy plains in a month called April in a county called Gray. Here's what all of the people there say. They say, so long, been good to know ya, so long, been good to know ya, so long, it's been good to know ya, this dusty old dust, it's a getting my home, and I got to be drifting along. Now the dust storm hit, and it hit like thunder. It dusted us up, and it covered us under. It blocked out the traffic, and it blocked out the sun. Straight to home all the people did run, singing, so long, been good to know ya, so long. It's been good to know ya, so long. It's been good to know ya, this dusty old dust, it's getting my home, and I got to be drifting along. Now the sweethearts nights they sat in the dark and they sparked. They hugged and they kissed in that dusty old dark. They sighed, they cried, they hugged and they kissed. Instead of marriage, they talked like this: honey, so long. It's been good to know ya, so long. It's been good to know ya, so long. It's been good to know ya, this dusty old dust. It's getting my home, and I got to be drifting along. Now the telephone rang and it jumped off the wall. That was the preacher just a-making his call. And he said, kind friends, this may be the end, and I've got your last chance for salvation from sin. Now the churches was jammed, the churches was packed. That dusty old dust storm, it blew so black that the preacher could not read the words of his text. So he folded his specs and took up that collection, singing so long. It's been good to know ya, so long. It's been good to know ya, so long. It's been good to know ya, this dusty old dust. It's getting my home, and I got to be drifting along. Woody Guthrie wrote some of the best songs in America, gotta say. Now, I spent many of my earlier years, particularly when I was a struggling young artist, quite literally a starving artist, outside of a small town called Rushville, Illinois. And I had one of those wonderful deals that you could get back in the late 1970s, the $50 a month farmhouse. Now, that's not as good as you think. I had an agreement with the landlord. I would rent the farmhouse for $50 a month, but I was not to call him when something went wrong. And friends, believe me when I say he got the better end of the deal. But it was a wonderful place to live. It allowed me the freedom to explore music in a deeper way than just having to play out in bars and such. But I do remember, this is when I was first beginning to write my own music. It was late one fall. And this was the first time we'd had a decent harvest in a long time. And I remember I had gone out to grab an armload of logs to throw onto the wood stove. I was heating the house with a wood-burning stove. And it was a little bit after sunset, and I noticed they had just pulled the combine and a couple of grain trucks into the fields surrounding that old farmhouse, getting ready to combine the corn. Now, you know, friends, when it's time for the farmers to work, and the weather permits, they work until the work is done. And they worked all night long on that field. Every couple hours they'd go about to grab another armload of logs, and they'd still be out there combining the corn, getting a little farther down the field each time. And I think they finally ended up sometime around 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And I remember thinking, this was the time when the family farm was in a terrible state of crisis. Farms were being shut down left and right. And I was thinking that this might not be a scene we're going to see much longer. A small family operation working their own land. So I decided that it was my job to preserve that night and that image in the form of a song. That's this one right here, Silhouette Against the Stars. Feel the frost on the ground, see the afterglow of sunset settle down as it turns from dusk to dark on the prairie tonight. By the giant trees in peeling shades of white, the old farmhouse it stands. Silhouette against the stars on a chill November night. Hear the howling of the hounds as they call across the fields, and the combines rumbling down the rows. The corn is in, it's time to count the yields. By the strength of their hands, through the generations they have worked these lands. From the fathers to the sons and on it goes, just as surely as the river flows, and another harvest comes. Silhouette against the stars on a chill November night. Hear the howling of the hounds as they call across the fields, and the combines rumbling down the rows. The corn is in, it's time to count the yields. Grain trucks roll by with their mounds of yellow corn piled high, to the elevators and the fields they're bound, and with every bump it showers to the ground, till the roads are lined with gold. Silhouette against the stars on a chill November night. Hear the howling of the hounds as they call across the fields, and the combines rumbling down the rows. The corn is in, it's time to count the yields. Now the fields lie in sleep through the weary months of winter, cold and deep, beneath the frozen waves of drifted snow, till the balmy springs of wind begin to blow, and the cycle starts anew. In retrospect, the hounds howling across the field were probably coyotes. I didn't know that at the time. But still one of my favorite songs. Well, in 1848, a new law would be passed in Illinois that would revolutionize life in the farming areas. It was called the 2-mile rule, and it stated that a one-room schoolhouse would be built every 2 miles all across the state of Illinois, so that no child would have to walk farther than 1 mile to receive a free public school education. Now, friends, this would revolutionize rural life, especially for farm kids. It would produce generations of some of the best educated students we've ever had. Now, in the 1980s, I was involved documenting the oldest living musicians in rural Illinois, and I met many folks that told me stories about growing up and going to these one-room schoolhouses. One of my favorites was a man named Lawrence Royer, and he lived in Bader, Illinois. And Lawrence told me about the time as a young boy he had gone to the local one-room schoolhouse, the Union School. Now, the newspapers announced that the U.S. Geological Survey would be coming to their region on a specific day, and they would be surveying to create what we now have as the U.S. Geological Survey maps. This was a big deal in those days. Now the boys, being boys, decided that they would pull a little prank. And the night before the survey was to come to the area around the schoolhouse, they went out after dark and they borrowed a ladder from a local farmer. They took it to the one-room schoolhouse, propped it up against that front, right where the word union was painted, climbed up to the top. They had a little bucket of black paint and a small brush. Now, friends, all they did was paint a little arch over the two arms of the U, turning the U of union into O of onion. Now, I thought that was a pretty good story, but I learned a long time ago that, historical facts can get somewhat distorted in a good story. So later that afternoon, I went home, and I happened to have just purchased a copy of the U.S. Geological Survey for that very area, just to have it for this project. And as God is my witness, as I opened that map up on that day and to this very day, it still states Onion Schoolhouse. Now, schoolhouses were wonderful places. They'd be community centers. That's where you're going to have your dances. That's where your kids go to school. That's where you would vote. They also had a whole range of names. The community would get together. A farmer might donate a quarter section of land. Everyone would build supplies, bring in supplies, and build the school together. And then whoever donated the land got to name it. And there were many simple, common names like Union, but some that were not so common. Well, back in the 1980s, I was involved in a two-person play, might have been the 1990s now that I think about it, with my friend Pam Larson. And we were exploring the idea of the one-room schoolhouse, and while researching this subject, I came across a book that had a huge list of actual one-room schoolhouse names. So Pam and I just sat down and we decided to take those names and create a little musical piece out of them, which we put into the show. And I want to share it with you right now. Now, to do a song involving schoolhouses, you need to use an appropriate instrument. And this is one right here. This is an instrument called a Jew's harp, a jaw harp, a mouth harp, a frog, a fiddle, a Snoopy harp, an Arkansas harp, a gewgaw, a geegaw, a droomblah, or a Tennessee tooth trasher. Over the years, I've met a lot of retired one-room schoolhouse teachers that told me they had cigar boxes full of these things that they had taken away from kids. So, this is our song, the Schoolhouse Song, and these are all actual one-room schoolhouse names. I'm heading down the road to the one-room school where there's reading and the writing and the golden rule, named after people or places and things. Some were quite common and some just strange. There was Lick Skillet, Puckerbrush, Wapiti, Otter, Bent Lake, Wide Awake and Old Toad Holler, Pig Knoll, Duckwater, Gravelly Run, Lincoln, Jefferson, and Washington. Sugar Grove, Cranberry, Strawberry, Hackberry, Lime City, Orange City, Honey Creek, and Cherry. Potato Point, Peach Blossom, Pear Ridge, Pancake, Coffee Creek, Center Sandwich, Apple Pie, and my personal favorite, Bellyache. Prudence Park, Stone Jug, Temperance Hill, Breweryville, Happy Corners, Four Corners, Potterville, White Flock, Hemlock, Ragtop, Stove Prairie, Waggy, Froggy, Bogus, and believe it or not, Larry. White Oak, Red Oak, Cottonwood, and Hickory, Elm Grove, Maple Grove, Pine Grove, and Harmony, Mud College, Muddy Corners, Muddy Lane, Mudacre, Limbo, Nebo, Poe, and Shaker. Strange or different, simple or the same, because it doesn't really matter because it's only just a name. The Tennessee Tooth Trasher. Now, if you want to learn how to play that, be very careful, because if you don't play it wrong, it will hurt you bad. All right. Now, as I interviewed folks in rural America, initially just to learn about old music, I heard wonderful stories about life back in the days of the late 19th century. The early 20th century as well, I'd say. You know, I heard about life on the farm. They spoke of good times and bad times. They talked about getting by on next to nothing. They talked about hard work from morning to night, and not just the adults. Kids of all ages were expected to pitch in and work. But what I never heard were folks talking about feeling like they were poor. And I never heard them talking about being hungry. There was a great sense of community in rural America in those days, and still is. But you know, if you lived on a farm back in that era, it was a self-sustaining enterprise. You had a garden that would rival anything along the lines in Midwest living today. You would raise your own hogs for bacon, ham, sausage. You had a couple of cows for milk and butter, chickens for eggs. You always ate well. You might work hard, but you ate well. Now, Iowa songwriter Greg Brown kind of captured that sentiment in a song I want to share with you right now called Canned Goods. And friends, if you have ever enjoyed a meal in the winter that you raised yourself in the summer, you'll know exactly what he's talking about. Let the wild winter winds bellow and blow. I'm as warm as any July toad. Peaches on the shelf, potatoes in the bin. Supper ready, everybody come on in. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Ah, Grandma put it all in jars. Well, it's a fruit cellar down below. Watch your heading down, you go. Peaches on the shelf, potatoes in the bin. Supper ready, everybody come on in. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Oh, Grandma put it all in jars. I know that you may be weary and you don't give a damn, but I bet you never tasted a blackberry jam. Peaches on the shelf, potatoes in the bin. Supper ready, everybody come on in. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Oh, Grandma put it all in jars. She's got the magic in her, you know what I mean. She puts the sun and the rain in with her beans. Peaches on the shelf, potatoes in the bin. Supper ready, everybody come on in. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Oh, Grandma put it all in jars. When I go down to see Grandma, I gain a lot of weight. With her dear hands, she gives me plate after plate. She cans the pickles sweet and dill, and the sound of the whippoorwill and the morning dew. The evening moon, I really gotta go down and see her soon. 'Cause canned goods that you get at the store now, they ain't got the summer in them anymore. You bet your Grandma just as sure as you're born, I'll take some more potatoes and a thunderstorm. Peaches on the shelf, potatoes in the bin. Supper ready, everybody come on in. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Taste a little of the summer. Ah, Grandma put it all in jars. Makes me hungry just thinking about it. Well, now you may work hard on a farm, but you would also play well too. For every harvest event, there was a square dance. Now, music and dancing were a big part of rural life long before television and radio, but they actually were still current well into the 1960s. And about 15 years ago, the small town of Perry, Illinois, still had a square dance about 4 times a year. I was actually invited to come and sit in with the band. It was a remarkable experience. Now, you would have live music for these events. You didn't have recorded music initially. You might have a guitar player, a banjo, certainly a fiddle player, but if you were really lucky, you had one of these. Now I'm going to take just a minute so I can set this up in such a way that folks can see it while I play it. This is an instrument called a hammer dulcimer. This particular one was built in 1880 in the small town of Vermont, Illinois, by a man named Daniel Van Antwerp. So this dulcimer is played at countless square dances, box suppers, church get-togethers, jam sessions. It just oozes with life. Now, I found it in an old barn and restored it into playing condition. We won't talk about the condition it was in, but it was a mess. But it has a much different sound than a modern dulcimer. Old-time dulcimers have a sharp, bright sound because they needed that edge to cut through the noise. They didn't have microphones. Here's the basic sound. Now that's radically different than a modern dulcimer is going to sound like. Now, during my years interviewing musicians, one of the people I spoke with was an old-time square dance caller named Glenn Hanning from Fandon, Illinois. And he told me that this next song I'll play for you was one of the best-loved square dance songs in the country. And in Illinois, between 1870 and 1930 or so, you couldn't go to a dance without hearing it. They would also dance a special dance called the Texas Star to that. Now, it's a melody you'll recognize. This is an old tune called Golden Slippers. There you go. Now there is a wonderful dulcimer player who lives up in St. Charles, Illinois, Bill Robinson. He was actually one of the folks I interviewed in this process. He's a third-generation dulcimer player from Schuyler County, Illinois. And he told me he learned on an instrument exactly like this, probably also built by Daniel Van Antwerp. He also tells me that I've got it tuned wrong, but after 20 years of playing it this way, sorry, Bill, I'm not changing. Now, I mentioned earlier that folks in rural America have a sense of community and a sense of caring for one another that has gone back for generations and generations. If you happen to be driving in the country and you pass a farmer in a pickup truck, he's going to wave at you. And you're supposed to wave back, by the way. That's standard polite manners. And I guess the tradition just goes back to a time when neighbors were necessary to help one another. You never knew when he's the guy you're going to call up to pull you out of a ditch or help you when the power goes out or any other tragedy that could happen in farm life. Well, I'd like to kind of go off on that theme a little bit and do a song I wrote about a situation where a farmer was killed and the community came out to show their support in a way you don't see very often anymore. And I was so deeply touched, I felt I needed to combine that story and create a song. I also, though, want to use the words of the great poet Carl Sandburg. Probably no other poet in America understands the relationship between the land and a farmer like Sandburg does. So what I want to do is a combination of my song, The Final Harvest, with the poem Illinois Farmer from Carl Sandburg. Bury this old Illinois farmer with respect. He slept the Illinois nights of his life after days of work in Illinois cornfields. Now he goes on a long sleep. The wind he listened to in the corn silk and the tassels. The wind that combed his red beard 0 mornings when the snow laid white on the yellow ears in the bushel baskets in the corn crib. That same wind will now blow over the place here where his hands must dream of Illinois corn. The early streaks of dawn were catching the horizon. My eyes were playing tricks out on the road. So I pulled into the cafe just the side of Morris for a cup of strong black coffee, tired to the bone. Staring down the steam rising from my cup and saucer, I was trying to clear my ears of that highway sound. When a man in faded coveralls and well-worn leather work boots came in and took a stool a few seats down. The waitress brought him coffee. He ordered up the special. She asked, "What brings you out in this autumn blow?" He said, "You know, Gerald Steffes, the old man killed here late last summer." She sat down, her pad and pencil. She said, "I don't think so." But he was just like any one of us, an ordinary farmer. He was a common man with a heart and a calloused hand. And he hoped to live just long enough to pay off all his mortgage and then to reap one final harvest from his land. He wanted one final harvest where no banker held his paper. Used to say that was his heart's desire. Just one final harvest where the land he worked was his alone. And then he'd quit that farming business, sell his tractors and retire. And he said, "You know, he nearly made it, stirring sugar in his coffee. Just 5 more years till he was free and clear. When that darn old John Deere tractor rolled and crushed him here last summer, and left his wife and family helpless, the worst time of the year. few of us are meeting just to help him bring the crops in. You know, he did the same for all of us before. Then he finished up his coffee, slowly rose and he paid his ticket. He left a quarter tip, headed toward the door. The sun was up and shining as I pulled back on that highway. I slipped it into gear and headed west. But as I topped the hill, couple miles past the diner, I saw a sight below me that took away my breath. Gleaming in the morning light in rolling fields of amber, rumbled more than 30 combines in a row. Crawling across the cornfields like a swarm of hungry locusts, blowing silage all around like it was snow. There were grain trucks overflowing, bound for Morris and Manuka. There were pickups parked a mile along the ditch. As I stared there at that eerie sight, you know it seemed a fitting tribute to an ordinary man and a simple wish. He wanted one final harvest where no banker held his paper. Used to say that was his heart's desire. Just one final harvest where the land he worked was his alone. And then he quit that farming business, sell his tractors and retire. Final Harvest. Got a chance to perform that song for the family, interestingly enough, about a year or two after I wrote it. And trust me when I say that was a nerve-wracking experience. But I was very happy to learn that they liked the song. And they saw it as the tribute that I meant it to be. Well, this next song is a song I love to do when I'm talking about farms. It's a song everybody knows, an old gospel song. But what you don't know is that the song was written on a tractor. In 1929, in the great state of Missouri, a man named Albert E. Brumley was sitting on a farm-all tractor pulling a 2-bottom plow, working on a 5-acre field. Now, friends, if you have ever experienced 2-bottom plows in 5-acre fields, you know firsthand that he had a long, hard, hot day's labor ahead of him. And he was about, maybe halfway done when he was inspired with the words and the music that we now know as the song, I'll Fly Away. However, being a good, hard-working Midwestern farmer, Brumley knew he couldn't stop something as critically important as the day's labors for something as trivial as a song. Not even a great song, not even a great gospel song. But friends, Brumley was nobody's fool. He knew he'd hit a good lick there. So there he was, all afternoon, sitting on that tractor plowing away. But while he's doing that, he's humming that song over and over in his head. So there he is, a plowing and a humming and a plowing and a humming, until finally, about the time that the sun sets down below the hills, he finishes up all 5 acres. He takes the tractor on up to the barnyard, disconnecting the plow, cleaning it all off for the next day's labors. Walks on up to the farmhouse on the top of the hill, making sure he scrapes the mud off of his boots so as to not needlessly annoy his wife by tracking mud into her clean kitchen. He walks into her clean kitchen, washes his face and hands at her clean kitchen sink, and then he sits down at the kitchen table, and friends, it's then and only then that he writes out the words and the music to the song he'd been singing all day long. And this is what he come up with. Now some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to a land on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. Well, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Now when the shadows of this life have grown, I'll fly away. Like a bird from prison bars has flown, I'll fly away. Well, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Now just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a land where joy will never end. I'll fly away. Well, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Well, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Ah, there you go. And I didn't even make you pass the collection plate this time. Actually, I did that once at a show. I was playing at the Sandwich Fair. And in the middle of that break, I made some kind of a joke about time to pass out the collection plate. We actually got a dime, 3 pennies, a stick of gum, and a piece of chocolate. So, oh, let's see here. I've got time for just a couple of more. And I want to go back to this guitar. This is a National Tricone resonator guitar. The one I just played, by the way, was a 1936 wood-bodied dobro. I want to use this one, though, to talk about the weather. Now, you know, the weather means different things to different people. Those of you up in McHenry, now, you're kind of in the collar counties of Chicago, but you're still urban. You're not rural. Some of you might be. But for the most part, you aren't. So for you, you wake up in the morning, you turn on WGN, you see what Tom Skilling has to say about the weather, and you dress accordingly, and you're done. But when you live in rural America, and especially when you are a farmer, well, the weather is more critical. You are in it. You are working in it. You rely on it. And it's a completely different experience. In one of my old farmhouses I lived in, it was west of Macomb, Illinois, on a stretch of land that was flat as a pancake. And in the morning, I wouldn't turn on the TV. I didn't have one, actually. But I'd just get up, walk out to the front porch, which faced due west. Now, all you have to do is stand on the porch, look off to the southeast corner, as far as you could see, southwest, I guess, and see what was going on there. And basically, whatever you saw on that horizon was what you were going to get about 6 hours later. Now, a friend of mine is a songwriter in South Dakota named Chuck Sukay. And I would like to do a song of his that talks about the weather from the farmer's perspective. He's actually a farmer himself. As a matter of fact, he is the official folk songwriter for the state of South Dakota. Now, Governor Pritzker, if by any chance you happen to be viewing this, I would certainly like to see that in Illinois, and I would be delighted to volunteer for that position. At any rate, this is a song Chuck wrote about weather from the farmer's perspective. It's called God, It's Great When It Rains. God, it's great when it rains. Hope it lasts all day. A few arthritic pains, that's a small price to pay. God, it's great when it rains. Think I'll head into town, shop the stores along Main, just walking around. God, it's great when it rains. Back the car from the shed, the county road might complain, so I'll drive through the pasture instead. When the sun comes out in a day or two, the whole wide world's gonna look brand new. Grass gonna grow and the bees gonna buzz, blossoms explode, and it's all because it's great when it rains. Roll up my pants to my knees, don't worry about stains. Feel the mud my toes squeeze. God, it's great when it rains. Worms all over the place. No ketchup, just plain. Robin stuff in her face. Yes, when that sun comes out in a day or two, the whole wide world's gonna look brand new. Grass gonna grow and the bees gonna buzz, blossoms explode, and it's all because it's great when it rains. My city friends don't think so. Spoils their tennis games. Ah, but what do they know? God, it's great when it rains. God, it's great when it rains. Out here on the plains. God, it's great farmer's perspective on the weather. Well, I've got time for one last song. Let me once again take a moment to thank the McHenry Public Library for having me do this performance for them, live streamed. I hope that you folks have enjoyed the music, maybe learned a little bit about a different perspective on life. A very special thank you to the Illinois Humanities Council for making this program available and allowing us to do these live stream performances from the Rhodes Scholars Speakers Bureau. Again, you'll notice in the comments section of the YouTube live stream feed, there is a link to a survey. That survey just needs basic demographic information about who, what, and where folks are that are listening and seeing the show. We don't really need your name or any kind of personal information. But this information is used by the Illinois Humanities Council to secure national level funding, which makes these programs possible. So please take a moment to do that. Also, I will, as soon as I finish performing, I will head over to the comments section and I will go ahead and respond to any questions that you've got. Feel free to connect with me there if you like. So, one last song. I'm going to go back to the 1936 Woodbody Dobro for this one. Now, friends, in the years following the Civil War, life in Illinois was very good. Soldiers returning from the war started new businesses, started farms, started families. And especially the farmers, it was a time of surprising new growth. You had advancements in mechanization and in the Industrial Revolution that were allowing better and better plows. The onset of steam-powered threshers, steam-powered tractors. Yields were going up. There were new transportation routes that allowed farmers in the middle of the state to bring their grain and their agricultural products to market in places like Chicago. Unfortunately, for the farmers, it wasn't a good time financially. Even though there were increasing yields, they were losing money because the folks that were responsible for transporting, storing, and selling their goods were taking all of the profits, charging exorbitant rates. So the farmers organized. They created the Grange movement. And in 1871, they became politically powerful enough to get the Illinois state legislature to pass laws that would, for the first time, put a cap on the charges that farmers could be charged to ship and store their commodities. And for the first time, farmers began to have a breath and come out ahead. Now, music was a big part of that program, and this is the song that was their call to arms. The farmer is the man who feeds us all. The very song I used as the title of this program. They say that this song reflects the sentiment of William Jennings Bryant's speech, The Cross of Gold, that he would later deliver in Chicago, Illinois. And I'll paraphrase it here. He said something along the lines of, "The great cities of our nation rest on our broad and fertile prairies. Burn down your cities, but leave your farms intact, and the cities will spring up again as if by magic. But destroy your farms, and grass will grow in the streets of every city in the nation." Now, a friend of mine used to even have a more succinct way of saying it. He himself was a farmer. And he used to say, "Don't you ever cuss a farmer with your mouth full. The farmer is the man who feeds us all." When the farmer comes to town with his wagon broken down, oh, the farmer, he's the man who feeds us all. If you'd only look and see, I think you would agree that the farmer, he's the man who feeds us all. Oh, the farmer is the man, farmer is the man, and he lives on the credit till the fall. Takes him by the hand and they lead him from the land. Middleman's the one that makes it all. lawyer hangs around, the butcher cuts a pound, but that farmer, he's the man who feeds us all. The preacher and the cook go strolling by the brook, but that farmer, he's the man who feeds us all. Oh, the farmer is the man, farmer is the man, and he lives on a credit till the fall. And they take him by the hand, they lead him from the land. Oh, the farmer is the man who feeds us all. When that banker's up in smoke and the merchant's going broke, they forget that it's the farmer who feeds us all. It would put them to the test if the farmer took a rest, then they'd remember he's the man who feeds us all. Oh, the farmer is the man, farmer is the man, and he lives on a credit till the fall. His pants are wearing thin, his condition, it's a sin. Oh, the farmer is the man who feeds us all. Oh, the farmer is the man, farmer is the man, and he lives on a credit till the fall. His pants are wearing thin, his condition, it's a sin. Farmer is the man who feeds us all. Yes, the farmer is the man who feeds us all. Well, friends, I'm Chris Vallillo. I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening as we sing songs and tell stories about farms and farm life. Once again, thanks to the McHenry Public Library. Keep an eye on their pages because they will be doing other live stream performances. It is an important way to stay connected with your public library in these times. And a very special thanks to the Illinois Humanities Council who makes this presentation possible. If you'd like to know more about the music I play, you can go to my website, chrisvallillo.com, C-H-R-I-S-V as in Victor, A-L-L-I-L-L-O.com. The tour schedule, sadly, is no longer current because every date on the book has been canceled right now due to COVID. We will see when the time comes when I'm actually able to go back out again live. But you can learn about my recordings. You can actually purchase them there. You can download them from iMusic and Amazon and all the appropriate usual suspects. I'm even on Spotify. But keep track of me through Facebook, Chris Vallillo on Facebook, and I will be doing more live stream performances. As a matter of fact, next week I'll be doing one for the Atlanta Museum in Atlanta, Illinois, and I'll perform "Oh Freedom," songs of the Civil Rights Movement. So I hope you can join us for those. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's program. I'm going to go ahead and head over onto my other computer and check out the comments. Be glad to visit with folks there. And so please stay safe. Take care of one another. Call up a friend. These are tough times, but we will get through this together. And I will see you down the road. Bye, folks. Got to figure out how to turn it off.